Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining for our check-in. Vice President Harris landed in New Hampshire. She hasn't started her event yet. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that she's going to call for an increase in the cap gains tax rate. So we'll see about that as part of this package she's announcing today. Most of the things that have happened in the world today are only indirectly connected to the presidential campaign. One of the things that I think we're all looking for is leadership tests for the vice president to have a moment of kind of a crucible to demonstrate her leadership capacity, et cetera. And it's obviously all complicated by the fact that she's the incumbent vice president. So probably most of you know, there's been a shooting at Atlanta school, at least 4 people dead. President Biden has put out a statement about the shooting. I've not seen anything from the vice president yet. I suspect she'll address it in her remarks. But obviously, the issue in a battleground state related to an issue where there's big divisions in the country and between Harris and Trump, going to be something people watch. 2 decisions by the administration, the Biden-Harris administration, that again speak to this issue that I think has not been explored very much or sufficiently, which is this question of how the Biden administration will use the power of incumbency to help the vice president, whether it's help her out of a defensive position or to help her go on offense. We've seen in the Bush-Reagan administration, Reagan-Bush administration, and Clinton-Gore, there wasn't always the sense from the candidate / vice president that the top of the ticket, to say the least, was doing everything possible to help a victory. I think these 2 decisions and just knowing as we do the relationship, personal and institutional, between Biden and Harris is going to be unprecedented in any of our lifetimes, I think, or certainly modern history, to see an administration in this sprint, just a couple months, doing everything it possibly can to help Donald Trump, help beat Donald Trump, which is obviously an imperative for Joe Biden and the people in this administration. And these are not unsophisticated people. So I don't know that they'll do anything antithetical to the policies that Joe Biden cares about, but this will be a lot of turtles on a lot of fence posts to see what happens when, how it's done, and the role they give the vice president, or the extent to which vice president's involved. So the 2 things: one is she came out on Labor Day against the steel deal from Nippon Steel that the administration was already pretty much against. Today, coming out that the administration is formally moving against to block Nippon Steel's takeover. And then second is the Justice Department and the intelligence community saying Russia is trying to interfere in the election. They previously suggested Russia is trying to help Trump. This obviously has echoes of 2016. A huge issue for policy and politics going forward is connected to both foreign interference and then also related the role of the tech platforms. Just what can the administration do to avoid interference, but also to avoid the appearance that will inflame the right that the administration is using its powers in whatever way, whether it's propaganda or functionally, to help Vice President Harris win the election. Very difficult to get the tens of millions of Americans who are super suspicious of both the tech platforms and of the government, so-called deep state, and of the Democrats, to believe that any action intended to expose or put a spotlight on or punish or head off foreign interference in the election is legit, rather than being done in some way to help the Democrats. So you saw this in the Obama administration. Wasn't an incumbent vice president, but their close ally, Hillary Clinton. Barack Obama himself and his national security and law enforcement team extremely concerned about the appearance to not seem like they were doing something to tip the election, but at the same time wanting to head off election interference. These are extremely complicated issues, policy and politics intersecting. And so this announcement today, we'll have to scrutinize more. We'll have to see what the vice president says about it, but I can tell you that this is going to be an ongoing question, again, about the tech platforms, about government interference, and then it seeps into the other big area that I'm worried about, which is the question of suspicion of election officials and whether they're doing everything in by the book way, not to favor Vice President Harris, but to simply safeguard the casting and counting of ballots. As you know, we've got Democratic governors in the bulk of the battleground states, not Georgia, but Democratic governors in the 3 Great Lakes states, Democratic governor in Arizona, not Nevada, but also in North Carolina. So go to your questions, and you can ask about anything you want or comment, either what we've just talked about here. As I set things up for the day, we'll continue to watch to see if the vice president comes out and speaks, but let's bring you folks in, and let's try to get as many of you in as possible. And we'll start with Elise. Tell folks who don't know where you are, who you're supporting, and what's on your mind.
Hi, Elise, the great state of Nevada. I'm voting against Donald Trump and Project 2025, so I'm voting for Kamala Harris. I just had a question today. My husband actually brought it up to me. He saw a news story about Donald Trump urging congressional Republicans for a shutdown of the government. September 30th is around the corner, which seems to be the time each year that we mark government shutdown. So I hadn't heard about it. I pride myself on being much more tuned into the news than my husband is, so I was a little salty that he brought it up to me. Don't think I've heard you talk about it, Mark, so I just thought I'd bring it up.
Yeah, so there is a deadline, and it's possible that the two sides could fail to reach an agreement. But the reason I haven't talked about it, the reason it hasn't come up, is the widespread expectation is that there'll be a deal. One of the big disputes is, will the deal take us into the lame duck sessions of between November and the end of Congress and during Christmas, or will they take it into March? Republicans seem inclined to try to get a deal through March. Not really clear what the Democrats will accept. And as always with these deals, there's besides the two main questions, how long is the extension, and you know what the economics of it are in terms of any increases or cuts, is poison pills or other things that people try to get on. So it's always a game of chicken. As I always say, Congress never acts until it absolutely has to, and sometimes not even then. But most analysts, most people on the Hill, most people in the administration believe there'll be a deal. There won't be a government shutdown before the election. Okay, Elise, thank you. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for the question. If it gets more dire, we'll definitely talk about it. Jack, come on in again. Tell folks who don't know where you are, who you're supporting, and what's on your mind.
Hi, Mark. Glad to be on the two-way platform. I am from New York, but I go to university in California, so I'm now registered there. Voting for Trump, been a registered Republican for, I guess, well, this is my first election voting. But I was wondering how your take on the election might kind of mix with some of the betting odds, and how you think the poly market and predicted odds might be helping Trump or not helping Trump, and how those odds might reflect polling or other outside factors.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. Do you watch those betting markets pretty closely?
I do, because I think that, someone who watches the political news frequently might be able to, through an arbitrage betting strategy, make some money more than the predicted markets, because they'd have events like during the Veep stakes. They had the governor of Kentucky, Andy Beshear, at 8% of winning the nomination. I knew that was not going to happen. His name was non contention at that point. You could bet no on that. You put $1,000 in, there is money to be made.
So you're interested in them in order to make money. You don't put, or do you put any credence in their capacity to predict or give a snapshot of where things actually are? It sounds like you feel the opposite about them, that you can outwit them because they're naive. Is that?
I think to some extent that's true. There might be something a little cyclical in there. I don't know how the feedback loop works, and how, if they take the polling into account, or whether the polling impacts them, or how it all works. But I think that, an astute, watcher of the cycle, someone who watches your program often, could probably make some money. I was wondering what your thoughts are on that, or how much you've looked into it.
Yeah. So I've had some respectful offline communication with people who work for the betting markets. I think they're completely ridiculous. And I find them to be, as I understand them, to be, again, someone like you could be able to outwit them, because they said Jeb Bush was going to be president. They are, the inputs, whether they're foreign or domestic, come from people who aren't expert. And while talking about politics and analyzing politics is not just the province of experts, I think that that there, some people I've been talking to who work for these organizations saying, well, there are a lot of really smart people on there. Well, the really smart people are being diluted by the people who aren't smart at all, and who are betting, off of, internet gossip and rumors and gut whatever. So I think I've never thought about the way you raised it, which is I should take my skepticism of them to go in and make some money. I think that's a good use for them, for someone smart like you and informed like you, to make money. In terms of whether they're predictive, in terms of whether they represent even a snapshot, I think as like a stop clock, they might occasionally be correct. But I respectfully disdain them, and I resent having to talk about them as often as I do. Although I like your question, your first one, it's asked it that way. But I think they're just silly. They're just completely silly, and I don't understand the fascination with them. I understand the power of the crowd and sort of sampling opinion, but I don't know why some random people putting down money on things they know nothing about would cause anyone to believe that there's, again, either predictive value or even snapshot value. I love your question, Jack. And if you want to go into business together, I'm happy to take 10%, but giving you some offline
Thank
advice.
you. Any
Jack,
questions for me as a young conservative?
my question for you is, do you think Trump's going to win? And how'd you find two-way?
I heard about two-way from one of my father's colleagues who knows that I am interested in politics and said that, you would be a good person to check out. And I've been an addict watching it every day. So thank you for that and for sucking up 30 minutes of my life. I love the morning meeting. And do I think Trump is going to win? If he gets really disciplined really quickly, I think there's a chance. But this honeymoon hasn't really ended for her. And I think that with the media really salivating over her every day, I think the voters are not getting to hear about the true differences in policy. So
What do
I'd
you like?
probably edge to her.
What do you like or admire most about Vice President Harris?
Um, I respect her character for sure. I think she's a good person. I'm not a big fan of Trump's character. I just think his policies put our country in a better place. Um, Maybe Vivek or DeSantis would have been my choice in the primary, but we're with Trump, so maybe we'll get a GOP reset in the future, but not now. And I think he's at least the vessel that I would use to
Yeah.
kind of fight some of the values that Harris
Jack,
promulgated. But he's a good
Jack,
person.
Jack, are you from New York City or New York State?
New York City.
Are your parents conservative?
They're pretty liberal, or like moderate Democrats, but
So it's an Alex P. Keaton kind of situation. You don't know
yeah,
what
a
that
little bit.
means.
But I think and this might be interesting for New York politics, but I think I have convinced my parents to vote for Trump.
Interesting. Well, Alex, I'd love for you to come back regularly. I'd love for you to bring your friends. I'd love for you to bring your parents. And I'd love for you to make $1 million off of those silly betting markets.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate the
Thank you, man.
conversation.
Really, really, really grateful to you for joining. All right. Let's sneak one more in here. Let's go to one of our all-time favorite members of our two-way community. That would be Clara from Silver Spring, Maryland. Clara, have you found a candidate yet? Or are you still undecided and disdainful of your choices? Clara, sorry, you're muted. I thought I muted you. All right, Clara. There you go. Clara, Silver Spring, are you still undecided?
I wasn't undecided. I'm not voting for either candidate. I'm writing in my son's name.
Okay.
And I am registered Democrat, center right. Very, very quickly. I read about a half hour ago, I think in the Times, but not sure, that US Steel says that if the merger isn't approved, they're going to move out of Pittsburgh. And I can't confirm that, but anyway, here's my question. I've read a few places that Harris can't win unless she wins 40 to 45% of males, and unless she wins more white working class votes. What do you think about that?
The 45 number sounds about right, but I don't know. I mean, it will obviously depend on how big she does with women. And there are some people who think she's going to have an unprecedented level of support from women. And obviously every female vote she gets is one less male vote she needs. White working class, I think she definitely needs more than she has now. But again, it's always a game of trade-offs. And if she gets more of young voters, more Hispanic voters, more women of all ages, she doesn't need as much. But clearly, her biggest vulnerability, particularly in the three Great Lakes states, is that white working class vote, where she's got some challenges. But I think it's always interesting to look at individual groups. But again, you got to look at the totality, and not sort of fetishize an individual group to say that's the single group, because we don't know who's going to turn out, and we don't know what the makeup of the electorate is going to be. And like I said, every white working class vote she doesn't get, she may be able to make up in some other way. And the steel thing is fascinating, and I'm sure the companies are going to have a strong reaction, because their argument is they need to be together as one company, or they can't survive. Clara, thanks for joining. Greatly appreciate it.
Love your work. Love your
you.
work, Mark.
Thank you, Clara. Come back often. All right, folks, that's our check-in. Again, the vice president is supposed to speak soon. You've got Donald Trump taping his Hannity town hall that will air tonight. Lauren Leader back at 6 o'clock. Please join her to talk about the Middle East. And then Sean and Tim and I will be back tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock Eastern time, for the morning meeting. Enjoy your afternoon, enjoy your evening, and we'll see you tomorrow morning. Thank you.